All right, live from the Clarendon Hills Music Academy studios, we've cobbled together a semi video production studio. This is the first one we're doing, so we're going to be super casual.
Hopefully it'll work out.
So maybe tell us who you are, who you work for. Give us the elevator pitch of maybe give us like the 60-second bio. And then we'll.
My bio might be a little bit longer.
You could go over 60 seconds.
No, I'm Mark Rediehs. I'm with Coldwell Baker Realty in Clarendon Hills here, and been in real estate for this is my going on my 37th year actually. I'm a resident in Clarendon Hills. I've been a resident all my life, and without giving my age, I've been here for 58 years. Raised two girls here. Got married and raised two gals here. And both of them went through the school systems locally, and they're both we're empty nesters now, and so the kids are gone, and one's in Nashville and one's local. So, but two wonderful gals, and but it was we love the town, been here all my life, and as far as real estate goes, I'm a second generation broker. We have stories to share. Actually, my mom was a realtor for many years, and so since I was little, my mom was a real estate as yours was, and she really is the one that motivated me in the business. She, and I used to go on her with drop-offs back then. You didn't have technology; you dropped off things all the time. So I was always on the car ride with her, always riding my bike to the office to get some money or something, running downtown Hinsdale. But there was at one point where we did some serious talking, and I kind of knew in the back of my mind it was in my blood, and so I think at one point I decided to go into real estate, and I actually started a couple years on my own, and there was a realty world here in Clarendon Hills, and I did it on my own because I want to make sure it's something I enjoyed doing, for sure, without being on mom's coattails, so to speak, and so it went really well, but unfortunately they closed their office down within a couple of years. So
what office?
The Realty World is on Burlington, over by the Fitness Works, 152, I believe, Burlington.
Was that Jeff Jensen at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So worked with him for a couple of years, and it went well. But when they closed down the Hinsdale office, and we went through kind of a little bit of a recession back then too, that's when I decided to join with Mom. So Mom and I were a team for years, for decades, and then Mom passed away. Mom passed away maybe 13 years ago or so. So we were a team for years, and really enjoyed it, and here I am still,
What do you see the difference? So you've been in it for the long game, so you haven't just jumped in. So what do you see the major differences as far as the business back then and the business now?
And I kind of alluded to it a little bit. It's the technology. It's just changed so much. It's actually a lot of ways made our job easier. Some things are a little bit harder, but for the most part, it's made the job a lot easier. In the old days, I was mentioning, getting a car ride with Mom, dropping stuff off. Well, I did the same thing in the 80s. In the 80s, we were all done everything by book. The MLS was a book, and it came out every 2 weeks, and that was our Bible of listings. And
wow.
You would share that book with your client maybe overnight, or you would take copies of the pages and you drop it off. My routine was to go door to door with my clients and drop off Xerox copies of MLS sheets to show them what's new for the week or 2 weeks even. And not long after that, we started getting into some computer work and so forth, and we'd start spitting out listings out of the computer and MLS system. But back in those days, everything was a card system when someone called in. The web didn't exist, or certainly wasn't used for real estate back then. But now today, everything's so high tech. The web is everything, as far as marketing goes. It's truly where most of the marketing is done. And the technology of just everything from showings and running out every day and obviously the phone itself obviously is just quite a change. Back then we didn't have cell phones, or the cell phones were just coming along, I should say that. That's when you had the trunk phones in your car, So I did have a cell phone back then, but remember you had pagers back then, and technology was so different back then. So
right, so not only taking more time, it sounds like almost back then it was more conducive to actually having a relationship.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like now that it might make the relationship maybe it's obviously important because you have to have a relationship with your client,
Yeah.
but now the fact that people are going on looking at stuff, they kind of know what they're looking at before they even reach you. And
With the technology, they're doing a lot of their homework first, and a lot of them may even have reached out already for lending and have reached out for different things. But you hit it right on the nail. The personal touch, excuse me, the personal touch itself is quite different. Everything has to be kind of a round table, and the truth is, I still do that, and I enjoy that some of the most because you have more contact with people. But you could go through a whole contract series, so to speak, and never meet the buyer if you're on the seller side, so to speak. The sellers may never meet them because they don't even go to closings these days. Everything because it's so easy, in the process. But it's not as personal as it used to be. The old days used to, especially in the good markets, you used to pull up to the front door and you just almost wanted to lock it behind you, and then write the contract inside the house,
Right.
And you wouldn't leave until you left that contract there with the other broker or something, and then you'd sit nearby at a coffee shop or something, and just wait, till you heard something. But there's a lot more hands-on, a lot more personal, Today I still do that, and there is people that are not into tech. Especially our older generation, they just they're not really into the techie part stuff. My mom was never into techie stuff.
Right.
I was always like, she was the talker of the team, and I was always the techie guy or the computer guy, So
yeah, and there's people I think that put stock in that handshake relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Like still to this day, and it almost seems like that's kind of part of your marketing angle, is that it is more about the relationship, which I
Right.
think is good. Talking about first time, so you have a first time buyer. It's such a, like, looking back on my first time buying experience, it can be an emotional roller coaster. Mm-hmm. Just going back and forth, and the lending, and is it going to go through all the way? And of course, like when some first time buyers don't have, they have to really work some angles with, especially I did, being self-employed, with lending, and it's just high emotions, right? So
Right.
How would you say, like, what's the best thing for a first-time buyer? Like, what are some of the things that you think about to maybe make that process a little easier?
So, a lot of information, also with technology, I have a lot of information is out there. So just kind of get an idea of what you want, where do you want to go, and everything can be done pretty quickly or easily up front. And I think a lot of people kind of know where they're going. I think number one thing is to get hold of a lender and get hold of the lender and find out exactly what you qualify for. And I've worked with buyers for years. It doesn't exactly mean, see what you can qualify at the highest level. It's what you're most comfortable with, too, and try to come up with those numbers that are most comfortable. But before you enter into any contract these days, you have to have some kind of letter form or a pre-approval type form from your lender. And so going into lending is probably the most important thing to do before you come into the market. You have to plan on time. This market's very fast-moving. Today's buyers are frustrated because they could go into offers and not get the house. There's multiple offer situations. It's very time consuming because the inventory is so low. And so it's very time consuming right now and so the buyers have to plan on time. If they're leasing something, which is very common with first time home buyers, or just getting married or something like that, and first time home buyers, you have to plan on time and start earlier this time, and be ready in case it does happen earlier on too. But you have to prepare for a little bit more time now these days,
Right. So is that so I can't remember if it's the pre-qualification or the pre-approval.
Yeah.
Which is more the silver bullet? Because
pre-approval, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Pre-qualification really just means that you can make a phone call to any broker, lender, and give some information over the phone, and maybe even do a credit report, but get kind of the okay on the phone, and they'll even send out a letter and say you're pre-qualified for this amount and that kind of thing. And any pre-approval or pre-qualification is actually based on the present numbers and so forth, and anything can change. But as a buyer, you want to keep it that way, of the numbers that you gave in the first place. In other words, you don't want to go out and make large purchases or take more debt on or anything like that. working with that lender, the pre-approval is a little bit different. A pre-approval, you actually go through the process of, it's almost like going through the same process of buying the house. You hand them all the paperwork that they need, all the statements that they need, and verifications that they need. They do the credit checks and so forth. And it could be done rather quickly. And then they get, so it's kind of it's a stronger way to approach a contract, so to speak, when you actually make an offer on a house, you know.
Right.
So
so now is an interesting time. Like, do you see the inventory is pretty low still?
Mm-hmm. Historically low.
So is the demand is that still super high, and the bidding, like, what are you seeing on a typical deal when there's a bidding thing happening, and what would your advice to be? Like, I mean, it can get emotional, and with high emotions come bad decisions, you know. So like when you're going back and forth, and that it's you know, a race to the top,
right?
Emotionally, what are you telling some of your clients? Because like, you don't want them to part of getting a house is getting a place to live, but the other part is getting a sound investment over time. So
it's hard especially for me. I get tied with the emotion too with them. You know what I mean? You want them to have the house that they fall in love with. But you got to tell them to kind of go into a little bit more open mind these days, because they just can't fall in love with something they can't get sometimes, you know.
Right.
So you have to take them. They have to take a step back, and it's hard because you go out there and you look at, you know, so many homes, and then you find that right one, and you get excited, you know, as a first-time home buyer. And unfortunately, there's, you know, 5, 8, 10, even more last year. I've heard all kinds of stories, you know.
Offers
and I could tell you
being put?
offers being put on the house. Yeah,
10 offers.
Last year it was crazy. Last year we had higher inventory, but was still low, and we had more buyers out there. So that's what made it a little bit more crazier than this year. This year we have very low inventory. For instance, Clarendon Hills has got, I think as of today, got 29 listings. Hinsdale has 85 listings. That's historically low. That's like below end of the year type thing, before, you know, like during Christmas time type thing. You know, it's very historically low. And also the buyer's pool has actually come down just a little bit, although the inventory is so low that things are still fast moving. We still are getting multiple offers. It's not all price ranges. Some price ranges take a little bit longer than others, but our market time is really low. We're talking about 28 days or so for market time. So things are still fast moving, and the buyers have to be prepared for that. It's best time to sell right now. That's no doubt, because pricing has continued to go up. The inventory has remained low, and it's definitely a seller's market right now. So definitely best time to sell right now.
So what do you hear? Like, well, how long is this going to last? Like, I know, get your crystal ball out, but I mean, what are they? I'm sure you're tied into what experts are saying and so on. I heard this was going to be done by now. Like they said, like 6 months ago, they're like, well, this is going to last, and it seems like it's kind of lasting beyond what they thought.
I think there's and I'm still so into statistics, and I look forward to listening to our economic luncheon and stuff like that. Right. You know, I'm so into that, but it's hard to say. I don't know if everybody's got really the crystal ball on that. And man, I tell you, after our large recession we had back in 2007 or 8, you know, it's like, oh, you would never say again that DuPage County is just going to skid like they always do, you know, or Clarendon Hills, Hinsdale is just going to skid. But the rates have gone up, but you know, they're still historically low. I mean, you know, my first rates are in double digits. When you first bought your house, you could share stories, but they're still low. You know, when you look at the historic, you know, the history of rates.
Well, look at
1982. Exactly. So when I first bought a house, I was in double digits. I remember when I first refinanced, I got that first under 10. You know, the war obviously plays a little bit of part there. They are saying that inventory is going to pick up over the next couple months. We've already seen an increase. I don't think that increase reflects Clarendon Hills, Hinsdale as much, but even as of today, they've seen an 8% increase week over week from the beginning of the year, you know, in inventory. But again, I don't see that with our area. Matter of fact, if anything, Hinsdale's gone down just a little bit on inventory, and Clarendon Hills has about stayed the same, you know. So I think that depends on areas when you just take the whole northern Illinois system, you know, or the MRED system, I should say. But I do think that inventory will probably pick up some. I'm out doing a lot of market evaluations, let's say, and giving pricing on homes. There are a lot of people out there thinking about putting their houses on the market and
Right.
and getting ready for the market. And so I do think the next couple of months we'll see a pop in that, and what a big. I would love to see the buyer pool pick up more. I know that there's hesitancy because of the war, because pricing is getting so high,
Right.
because the rates are going up. But I think buyers should see that. I don't think the pricing is going to go anywhere. It might slow down a little bit, but I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But I do think it might slow down a little bit. But as long as we have this inventory the way it is, and as long as we have a seller's market, it's going to continue going up.
Yeah, so there's only so much you can build, and I hear part of the problem is that like even if you have if you do a tear down, you're still only replacing it with one home, and there's
Yes.
only so much land that you can build on in this area. Do you see people? I know it like in Plainfield and in Naperville. Beyond that, there's nothing but cornfields, and in York, I can't even believe people are commuting from Yorkville to Chicago, but it's happening. So do you see a lot of trend of where people are kind of going, and the schools are decent out there too, like Plainfield, Naperville, obviously those areas have decent schools. So do you see a trend of people going, you know what, I'll suck it up and I'll do a hour commute?
Yeah, and I've been out as far as Plainfield, Yorkville, Aurora last year, and been in the city. Been far south as New Lenox, Juliet. Don't go as much further up north, but I was up the lake shores and so forth. But yeah, I do see people seeing that benefit. It's usually not your typical person that wants to hop on that train and get a half an hour ride.
Right.
But I had family live out there. They buy out in Plainfield. They get a lot more house for their money. And they're able to hop on their train in Aurora, and they don't mind the 40-minute, ride. There's express trains from Aurora, and they park their car and head
Route
on.
59.
And again, hopping on I-55, as you know, it's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit further, but there are a lot of people when they're looking at houses or when they're looking in these areas too. That is a big deal, though. It does add an extra, especially if you're working in the city, which today, it's changed so much. Look at our parking lots; they're empty.
Right.
So will that change back eventually? Will people going back to the city more? Will be working at home more? We have to be seen. But for a long time, when those parking lots were full, an extra half an hour to 45 minutes was a big deal because that was the same going there and coming back. But Plainfield's got excellent schools, as you live out there, so they got excellent schools. The taxes are high, the taxes get up there, and some of this new construction, even though you're getting a new construction, the taxes are getting up there with building new schools and the town growing and that so forth. So I haven't heard a lot of excitement in that area, but you definitely get more for your money as you head even south or west, from us.
Yeah,
you definitely get more for your money, and you could get into new housing at a fraction of the cost that you're paying here, obviously. But that's what you're paying for. I think that's why Clarendon Hills, Insdale area is so, it's that train. It's to get, the easy access to the highways, and the schools schools probably get up there number one, especially these days. I have more discussion about schools than anything else, probably.
Right. It's all about the schools. But so Clarendon Hills is unique, though, because it's got, it's one of the few towns that doesn't have a main annex going through it. And that was, I don't know when they voted that. It was like in the 70s at some point.
Right.
But they made a conscious decision that we're not going to have a Cass Avenue. We're not going to have a main street that goes from Ogden to 55th. And on one side, that's what makes Clarendon Hills unique. Mm-hmm. On the other side, that's what makes people who live in Hinsdale go, "Where's Clarendon Hills?"
Right.
Like who've never been here. Like so, it's like you like even around this area, people who live here, So it's a little more challenging to market in the town, but we've been doing a good job at kind of getting the word out and getting the new businesses in this town. What would you say would be? So what's unique? Like, what is that unique thing about Clarendon Hills? Because it is different than any other town. Even when you're just the whole layout, the whole driving through the town, it's not a grid system. It seems like, and I don't know, you may have a better pulse on this, but it seems like to me when I'm looking at the events, we've almost had a flip of new families moving
Oh,
in.
yeah.
A lot of more young, like I'm getting more calls about lessons from 5 and 6 year olds.
Yeah,
like 3,
right.
and even like moms that are like 4. Can we? Can we? I was like, I don't know about 4. But it seems like there's kind of been a flip. What's your
Totally, and I'm obviously on that opposite flip now because I was raised in town, and so, I could be downtown at one of our events, and you're just everybody's like, you probably know everybody here, and I'm like, I don't know anybody here, it's like there's a big change, in
and it happened
families,
quick, and it happened quickly,
very quickly
over the pandemic, like in that 2-year period. Would you say?
Still happening? I think Clarendon Hills. We've used those taglines on hidden gems and so forth. I raised my kids here. I was raised here. I want my kids to be raised here because I enjoyed my life so much. I mean, I really was a happy kid for the most part. So I wanted my kids to have that. I wanted my kids to have the schools. But I guess being locked in, so to speak, might give you a little sense of security too, if that makes any sense. Clarendon Hills is so small; it's referred to as Mayberry. It's everybody's so friendly, and it's small, and a lot of people, of course, know what's going on in town and everything. But it might give you a little bit better sense of a security when you're kind of locked in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
When you can look at crime and that kind of stuff, and easy access or not to our town, and of course, all towns have their times, but for the most part, Clarendon Hills is kind of hard to get in and out of, for that reason, But it's quaint, and when people come looking, and when they walk through my open houses, or when I get the phone calls from out the outside, so to speak, I'm like, well, how'd you get my name, or how'd you hear about Clarendon Hills, and especially open houses, I'm like, well, how'd you find me, that kind of thing, and technology is helping a lot today, the web's helping a lot, and getting people into town, but a lot of it's by chance, they were looking at Hinsdale, and maybe a little bit more expensive, and so, well, how about coming over and look at a couple of houses over here, the next thing you're in Clarendon Hills or Western Springs or something like that,
Yeah.
So a lot of those stories have to do with just kind of running into it accidentally,
Right, because how else would you run into it?
Exactly.
Right.
Like I said, technology helps that a lot. And so we talk about schools, and when they do their homework, and buyers are doing their homework. All that information's out there. That's what's so different about technology these days is that there's a lot of information that's out there for them now than there used to be. Although the process, like you said, is so crazy that I of course highly recommend using a broker as you go through, and I of course highly recommend an attorney and a lender to use all the way through, because those things are going to make it so much easier for the process itself.
Whatever the cost is, it completely is. So looking back on the last 2 years, what do you say? Final question, just to wrap it up, is obviously a challenging last 2 years with the pandemic. Hopefully we're out on the other side of this thing. Quite honestly, I think no matter what happens moving forward, I think people are going to take the position that we're on the other side of this thing.
I hope so.
Hopefully.
You keep on hearing about the variants and changes and numbers going up. You're just like,
let's just let's just be done. But so I think in this area, there was some definitely out of the lemons we got handed. There was some lemonade made. What do you see in that area? Like some of the new businesses coming in. I see and it was probably economic that made it more doable for people to take like business owners to take a risk to even open a business during a seemingly horrible time to open up a business.
Yeah. Hey, this area. Well, you look at the last 2 years, and you look at the pandemic, and there's no doubt that I have been really busy the last couple of years. Last year I've been very blessed to have the business that we had last year. And despite the pandemic, that it really started right around then. And to be truthful, even though we had to do things different as a broker and wear masks and be just more, there was a time we couldn't do open houses. It was not allowed by the state. You just had to go with the flow. But we still figured out different ways of doing things. FaceTime and video and things like that became more common, and it still is today, believe it or not, because of that. Virtual technology obviously is real important for that reason. But we did see nothing but good as far as real estate and town growth. I mean, there's no doubt. You've seen the changes in Clarendon Hills here.
Yeah.
No doubt that we've seen growth in business and the restaurants and construction. And I think all that probably helps bring the town along.
Right.
I always think I said, just everybody's complaining about the construction and everything, but I'm just like, hang in there because we're getting there, and we are getting there. We got
It's
a few
getting
more
close.
curbs to put in there, and they're being put in now. But man, the restaurants are great to have in town. It's nice to be able to, live in town and just walk a couple blocks and
Yeah, this
stay
summer is going to
close,
be really, you're going to see it.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty exciting with the events and everything, and outside seating, and some of the improvements the restaurants are still going to make, and still restaurants coming, and still new stores coming, and I think that's all good stuff.
Great. Well, cool. Well, we appreciate what you do for the chamber. Mark's been our treasurer for like over a decade. Not that long, but it's it's kind of a thankless job. Keeping track of the numbers, very involved with Lions Club. Very, very involved throughout the town, and we appreciate that. We need business owners like that, right? So just to keep things going, and thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time.
Yeah.